Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. They say hunger makes you do crazy things, but I never thought it would make me see things that weren't there. Or were they? Last Tuesday at exactly 11:47 p.m., a DoorDash notification lit up my phone. Your order has been delivered. The problem? I hadn't ordered anything. And when I opened my front door, the food was there, steaming hot, fresh, with no delivery driver in sight, no car pulling away, nothing but the cold October wind rustling through the maple trees on Sycamore Street. If you're listening to this alone, especially if you've ever ordered late-night delivery, you might want to check your locks. Because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about those harmless food apps we use every single day. Are you ready? Good, let's begin. The story starts now. The packaging was perfect. Too perfect, actually. A pristine white bag from Giovanni's Italian Kitchen, my favorite restaurant in downtown Portland. The receipt stapled to the bag showed my usual order: chicken Alfredo, extra parmesan, garlic bread, and a tiramisu. Even had my apartment number right. 3B at the Riverside Complex. I stood there in my doorway, barefoot on the cold concrete, staring down at this mysterious delivery. The bag felt warm against my fingers as I picked it up. Fresh. Like it had just left the kitchen. "Hello?" I called out into the empty hallway. My voice echoed off the beige walls, bounced back at me like a mockery. The motion sensor lights had already clicked off. Whoever delivered this had been gone for at least 30 seconds. I checked my phone again. No DoorDash order in my history, no Uber Eats, no Grubhub, nothing. My bank app showed no recent charges. But there it was, my exact order from Giovanni's, down to the extra napkins I always requested. The smart thing would have been to throw it away, call the restaurant, report it to the building manager. But, God, I was hungry. I'd been editing videos for my freelance client since noon, surviving on stale coffee and whatever crumbs I could find in my desk drawer. The smell of garlic butter was making my stomach twist into knots. I brought the bag inside, set it on my kitchen counter. The apartment felt too quiet. Even the usual hum from Mrs. Chen's TV upstairs was absent. Just me, the mysterious food, and the soft tick-tick-tick of my analog wall clock. I unpacked everything slowly. The containers were the eco-friendly kind Giovanni started using last summer. The Alfredo sauce hadn't even separated. Steam rose from the pasta like little ghosts escaping into my kitchen. Everything looked normal. Perfect. Exactly how Giovanni's always packed their orders. My laptop was still open on the dining table, the video timeline I'd been working on frozen mid-edit. I glanced at the security camera app on my phone. Our building had installed cameras in the hallways 6 months ago after some packages went missing. Maybe. I scrolled back through the footage. 11:45 p.m. Nothing. 11:46, empty hallway. 11:47, the notification on my phone. But the hallway remained empty. At 11:47 and 13 seconds, the food just appeared. One frame, empty doorway. Next frame, white delivery bag sitting perfectly centered on my doormat. My hands trembled slightly as I set the phone down. Maybe it was a camera glitch. Had to be. Digital hiccup. Happens all the time with cheap security systems, right? The pasta smelled incredible. My mouth watered despite the growing knot of unease in my chest. I grabbed a fork, twirled a small bite. Tasted exactly like Giovanni's. Creamy. Rich. That hint of nutmeg they always added. That's when I noticed the receipt again. Really looked at it this time. The order time said 11:15 p.m. The delivery address was right. The name on the order, Sarah Chen. That was me. But at the bottom, where it usually showed the payment method, it just said, Prepaid special delivery. Special delivery. What did that even mean? I ate another bite, then another. Hunger won over caution, like it always does. The garlic bread was still warm, butter soaking through the foil wrapper. Everything tasted exactly as it should. Better even, like they'd put extra care into this order. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Enjoy your meal, Sarah. You've been selected." Selected? Selected for what? I typed back quickly. Who is this? I didn't order any food. 3 dots appeared. Someone was typing. Then nothing. The dots vanished. I waited, fork suspended halfway to my mouth, Alfredo sauce dripping back into the container. Another buzz, another message, "Check your door." My blood turned to ice water. I set the fork down, crept toward my front door. Through the peephole I saw another bag. Same white packaging. Same perfect placement on my doormat. This time I yanked the door open immediately. Looked left, right. The hallway stretched empty in both directions. The stairwell door at the end hadn't moved. I would have heard it. It squeaked like a haunted house sound effect. The new bag was heavier. Inside, a bottle of wine. My favorite Pinot Noir from the organic market on Division Street. A box of chocolate-covered strawberries from that expensive place in the Pearl District. Things I'd never order for delivery. Things that weren't even available on delivery apps. My hands shook as I brought this second delivery inside. The wine was chilled to the perfect temperature. The strawberries looked fresh dipped, chocolate still glossy. I checked the security footage again. Same thing. Empty hallway 1 second, bag appearing the next. No transition, no blur of movement. Just there. The rational part of my brain screamed at me to call someone. The police, my sister in Seattle, anyone. But what would I say? Help? Someone keeps leaving me free food? They'd think I was crazy, or pranking them. I poured a glass of wine. Needed something to calm my nerves. It tasted expensive, complex. Nothing like the $10 bottles I usually bought. The chocolate strawberries were perfect too. Dark chocolate, exactly how I preferred, not too sweet. Another text, "Everything to your liking?" This time, I didn't respond. Just stared at my phone, wine glass trembling in my other hand. How did they know I was drinking it right now? Were they watching? I rushed to my windows, yanked the curtains closed. My apartment was on the 3rd floor, but suddenly that didn't feel high enough, safe enough. The familiar space felt invaded, contaminated by this strange generosity. My laptop dinged, new email. The sender was just a string of numbers. The subject line, Phase 1 complete. I didn't open it, couldn't. My finger hovered over the delete button, but something made me stop. Evidence. I might need evidence later. The food sat on my counter, looking innocent. Normal, but nothing about this was normal. Delivery drivers don't just vanish. Food doesn't materialize from thin air, and whoever was doing this, they knew too much. My favorite restaurant, my usual order, my preferred wine. I dumped the rest of the pasta in the trash, poured the wine down the sink, the chocolate strawberries followed. Maybe I was being paranoid, but my phone buzzed again. A photo this time. Me, from behind, standing at my sink. Taken through my kitchen window. Through the curtains I'd just closed. The message underneath. Wasteful. But don't worry, tomorrow's delivery will be even better. I dropped my phone. It clattered on the linoleum. Screen cracking against the corner of the cabinet. When I picked it up, the message was gone. No evidence it had ever existed. But I knew what I'd seen. Someone was watching me. Someone who could make food appear from nowhere. Someone who knew exactly what I wanted before I wanted it. And they were coming back tomorrow. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every small sound made me jump. The ice maker in the fridge, A car door slamming outside, the heating system clicking on. I sat on my couch with every light in the apartment blazing, clutching a baseball bat I'd forgotten I owned. By morning, exhaustion was making me question everything. Maybe I'd imagined the photo. Stress from work, too much caffeine, too little sleep. The cracked phone screen was real, but I could have dropped it any time. I called Giovanni's as soon as they opened at 11 a.m. "Hi, this is Sarah Chen. I wanted to check on an order from last night." "One moment. I'm not showing any orders under your name yesterday, ma'am. Would you like to place one now?" I hung up. Of course, there was no record. Work was impossible. I stared at the video timeline, but the clips blurred together. My clients would have to wait. I kept checking my door, my phone. Waiting. At exactly 6 p.m., the notification came. "Your order has been delivered." This time I was ready. I yanked the door open within seconds. The hallway was empty, but I heard something. Footsteps? No. The echo of footsteps that had already faded. And there, on my doormat, another pristine white bag. Inside, sushi from Kenichi's. The exclusive place that usually required reservations weeks in advance. Salmon sashimi, yellowtail, a dragon roll. Even the real wasabi, not the fake stuff, everything arranged in their signature black lacquer boxes. I left it outside, shut the door, locked it. My phone rang. Unknown number. "You're not enjoying our gifts, Sarah." The voice was strange, neutral. Neither male nor female. Processed maybe, or just very, very calm. "Who are you? What do you want?" "We want you to eat, to enjoy, to appreciate what we provide." "Why? Why me?" "You've been selected. I told you this already." "Selected for what?" But they'd hung up. The sushi sat outside my door for an hour before I caved and brought it in. Not to eat, just to examine, to look for clues. The receipt had the same prepaid special delivery message. No restaurant phone number, no driver name, nothing useful. I photographed everything. The containers, the receipt, the way the food was arranged. Evidence for what, I didn't know, but evidence nonetheless. That night, it came again at 11:47 p.m. Pizza this time. From 3 different places. A slice of New York style from Joey's, Chicago deep dish from Pizzeria Uno, and wood-fired margarita from that fancy place in Nob Hill. An impossible order. These places were miles apart. The food was all fresh, all hot, all perfect. I started to see the pattern. Breakfast at 7 a.m., lunch at noon, dinner at 6. Late-night meal at 11:47, always my favorites, always impossibly fresh, always appearing from nowhere. By the 4th day, I'd stopped throwing it away. What was the point? It would just keep coming. I nibbled at the edges, tested small bites, everything tasted incredible. No poison, no drugs, just food. The texts came regularly now. "Good girl, you're learning. Phase 2, initiating soon." I tried to leave my apartment on the 5th day. Made it to the parking garage before finding a breakfast burrito on my car's hood. Still warm. From the food truck that only operated downtown during weekday lunch hours. The message was clear. They could reach me anywhere. I called in sick to work. Told my clients I had the flu. Spent hours researching online, disappearing delivery drivers, mysterious food appearances, people being selected, nothing. A few creepypasta stories that didn't match my situation. Some conspiracy theories about underground restaurants. Dead ends. The food kept coming. More elaborate each time. Lobster thermidor, beef Wellington. Things I'd only seen on cooking shows. Things I'd dreamed about trying but could never afford. Each meal was a personal fantasy made real. On the 7th day, something changed. The dinner delivery included a note. "You've been such a good participant, Sarah. Time for phase 2. Check your door at midnight. Don't disappoint us." I tried to stay awake, set 6 alarms, drank an entire pot of coffee. But at 11:58 p.m., my eyes grew impossibly heavy. The apartment tilted, spun. The last thing I remember was the clock showing 11:59. I woke up in my bed at 6 a.m., fully dressed. No memory of walking to my room and on my nightstand. A silver room service tray with a perfect Eggs Benedict, still warm, a glass of fresh orange juice, real silverware. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the envelope underneath the tray. Inside, dozens of photos. Me, asleep in my bed. Taken from different angles. Different nights. Some from before the deliveries even started. They'd been in my apartment. Multiple times. Watching me sleep, the final photo showed me from last night. Unconscious on my couch, and in the background, just barely visible. A figure. Tall, wearing what looked like a delivery uniform. But where the face should be. I still can't process what I saw. Don't want to, can't. The note at the bottom of the stack read, Phase 2 successful. Your participation in the feeding program has been exemplary. Phase 3 begins tonight. Don't eat anything else today. Save your appetite. You'll need it. I spent that entire day in panic mode. Changed my locks. Pointless, since they'd been getting in without using doors anyway. Called the police. They took a report but clearly thought I was having some kind of breakdown. Tried to stay with my sister, but my car wouldn't start. The bus I tried to catch broke down. The Uber I called never showed up. They wanted me here, in my apartment, waiting. By evening, hunger was clawing at my stomach. I'd followed their instructions without meaning to. Hadn't eaten anything all day, too scared, too nauseous. But now, with the sun setting outside my window, my body was betraying me. At exactly 8 p.m., a knock at my door. Not a delivery notification. An actual knock. I peered through the peephole. A man stood there in a delivery uniform. Normal looking, young, maybe mid-20s, holding an insulated delivery bag. Delivery for Sarah Chen? His voice was normal. Human. Nothing like the processed sound from the phone calls. I opened the door but kept the chain on. I didn't order anything. He smiled. Friendly, confused. Shows right here you did. Giovanni's? Chicken Alfredo? That was last week. Ma'am, it's Tuesday. You ordered this an hour ago. Tuesday? No. It was... I checked my phone. Tuesday, October 15th. But that was impossible. The first delivery had been on Tuesday the 15th. 7 days ago should make it the 22nd. What's the date? He looked at me strangely. October 15th. Are you feeling all right? I slammed the door, checked my laptop, my TV. Every device showed the same date. Tuesday, October 15th. Either I'd lost a week or my phone buzzed. Time is fluid in the feeding program, Sarah. You'll understand soon. Open the door. Marcus is waiting. Marcus. They knew the delivery driver's name. I opened the door again. Removed the chain. Marcus handed me the bag with that same friendly smile. As he turned to leave, I grabbed his arm. Wait, please tell me. Do you see anything strange about this delivery? He paused, turned back. For just a moment, his eyes looked empty, hollow, like looking into dark windows. Strange. No, ma'am, everything's perfectly normal. Enjoy your meal. He walked away. I watched him go. He didn't get in a car, didn't have a bike, just walked to the stairwell and vanished. Not disappeared. Vanished, like a TV turning off. Inside the bag wasn't food, it was a single envelope. Inside, an invitation. Dear Sarah, your participation in our feeding program has exceeded expectations. You've shown remarkable adaptability and acceptance. We invite you to join us for a special dinner tonight at midnight. Dress comfortably. Transportation will be provided. This is not optional. The management. At 11:45 p.m., I sat on my couch in jeans and a sweater, waiting. No point in running. They'd shown me that clearly enough. At exactly midnight, my apartment door swung open. I hadn't unlocked it. A woman stood there in the same generic delivery uniform. middle-aged, pleasant face, holding a tablet. "Sarah Chen, I'm here to take you to your dinner reservation." I followed her. What else could I do? We walked down the hallway, but instead of the stairwell, she opened a door I'd never seen before. Behind it, an elegant elevator with brass fixtures and soft jazz playing. "Going down," she said pleasantly. The elevator descended and descended, far longer than 3 floors. The numbers on the panel went negative, -1, -2, -5, -10. Where are we going? To dinner, of course. The others are waiting. Others? The doors opened to reveal a restaurant, but not like any restaurant I'd ever seen. The space was massive, impossibly massive. Tables stretched as far as I could see, each set with white tablecloths and flickering candles. And at every table sat people, hundreds of them, all eating in perfect silence. "This way, please." She led me through the maze of tables. I recognized some of the faces. The man from 4F who disappeared last month. His neighbors said he'd moved suddenly. Mrs. Patterson from the first floor who'd gone to live with her daughter in September. Others I'd seen around the neighborhood. All eating, all silent. We reached a table near the center, a single chair, a place setting, and across from me, I don't know how to describe what I saw. It wore a delivery uniform. It had a vaguely human shape, but the face was like looking at static, like reality couldn't quite decide what should be there. "Sit," it said in that processed voice from the phone. "Eat." Food appeared on my plate, the most beautiful meal I'd ever seen. Combinations of flavors and textures that shouldn't exist. Colors that didn't belong on food. Smells that made my mouth water and my mind reel simultaneously. What is this place? A necessary service. Humans need to eat. We need to feed. A perfect symbiosis. We who exist between. We who hunger for purpose. You create food delivery apps. Summon strangers to your doors with sustenance. You've built the perfect infrastructure for us to inhabit. I looked around at all the diners. Their movements were mechanical, synchronized, fork to mouth, chew, swallow, repeat. Are they feeding us? Yes. Every bite they take, we taste. Every meal they consume, we experience. Human sensation, human satisfaction. The only way we can exist in your realm, and if I refuse? The static face shifted, almost smiled. "Look at your plate, Sarah." I looked down. The food was gone, but I could taste it, feel it in my stomach. I hadn't moved, hadn't eaten, but somehow, you've been feeding us for 7 days. 7 loops of the same day. Each time you thought you were throwing the food away, you were consuming it in another timeline. Each meal you resisted, you devoured in another reality. You're already one of us, Sarah. Have been since the first bite. My hands moved on their own. Picked up the fork. The knife. I tried to resist, but my body wasn't listening anymore. Around me, hundreds of others did the same. An endless feast for things that could never truly eat. "Welcome to the feeding program," the thing across from me said. "Phase 3 is permanent residency." I wish I could tell you I fought back, that I found some clever way to break free, but for weeks, months, time doesn't work right down there. I sat at that table, eating, always eating, food that appeared and disappeared. Tastes that existed only in the moment of consumption. The others never spoke, never looked up, just ate in that horrible synchronized rhythm. I tried talking to them at first. The man from 4F, Mrs. Patterson. Nothing, like shouting at mannequins. The static-faced things moved between tables, watching, feeding off our feeding. Sometimes they'd lean close to a diner, and I'd see something pass between them. A shimmer. A transfer of something. Energy, one explained when I asked. Satisfaction, pleasure, the human experience of consumption. We exist in the spaces between moments, between order and delivery, between hunger and satisfaction. but we cannot taste, cannot feel, only through you. Days blended together, or the same day, repeating. I'd sleep at the table sometimes, wake up to find new food waiting. My body never changed, never felt full or hungry, just existed. A conduit for their feeding. But I noticed things. Small things. The elevator woman who'd brought me down. She still had a name tag. Jennifer. Still blinked. Still breathed in non-synchronized patterns. And sometimes, when the static things weren't watching, her eyes would dart around. Aware. Trapped like me, but not yet fully consumed. I started testing boundaries. Dropping forks, spilling water. Small rebellions that broke the rhythm. The static things would correct me, but each disruption caused them to flicker. Like bad reception. "You're new," Jennifer whispered one day as she passed with a tray. "Still fighting. Good. Don't let them complete the integration." Integration. That's what they called it when someone finally stopped resisting. When their movements became perfectly synchronized. When their eyes went empty like Marcus the delivery driver. I had to get out before that happened to me. The restaurant had patterns, routines. Every 6 hours, the static things would gather at the far end for what looked like a meeting. A shifting, writhing mass of not quite reality. During those times, they relied on the integrated humans to maintain order. I waited. Planned. When the next gathering came, I stood up. My body protested, tried to force me back down, but I'd been practicing, building resistance. I walked toward the elevator, slow, purposeful, like I belonged. "Where are you going?" An integrated human, dead eyes, monotone voice. "Delivery run," I said. "Special order, surface level." They tilted their head, processing. The integrated ones could think, but slowly. Like computers running on dial-up. No delivery scheduled. "Emergency order, check the system." They blinked, turned to check a tablet. I ran. The elevator was there, open. Jennifer inside with her hand on the button. "Hurry," she breathed. "They'll notice in seconds." We shot upward. The numbers climbed, -10, -5, -2. Behind us, I could hear it. A roar that wasn't quite sound. The static things had noticed. "It won't work," Jennifer said quietly. "The elevator only goes to the feeding floors now. All the buildings, all the apartments, they're all feeding floors. Has been since the first delivery app launched. We built the perfect system for them. Then how? We break it, crash the whole system." She pulled out her phone, an old model. "I've been saving battery for months, one chance." The elevator shuddered. Stopped. Floor -1. "They're pulling us back." Jennifer's fingers flew across the screen. "But if I can access the main delivery database, cancel every order, delete every account, crash their infrastructure." The doors started to open. Static figures waited beyond. Reaching. "Now!" Jennifer hit send. The world glitched. That's the only way I can describe it. Reality stuttered. The static things froze mid-reach. The elevator lurched, and suddenly, we were moving again. Up, up, past 0, past 1, past floors that shouldn't exist. We burst out into a loading dock. Gray dawn light. Real air, Seattle, no. Portland, my Portland, but wrong, empty. Every building had delivery signs. Every door had food bags waiting. An entire city turned into a feeding ground. "Run," Jennifer gasped. "The crash is temporary. They'll reset. They always do." We ran through empty streets, past abandoned cars with delivery bags on their hoods, past restaurants with lights on but no one inside. A city of endless meals with no one left to eat them. My apartment building loomed ahead. Familiar, but wrong. Every window had that static flicker. "Not there." Jennifer pulled me aside. "Never go back to where you fed them. Find people, real people, the ones who still cook, who still gather, who still share meals without apps." "Where?" She pointed toward the hills. Farmers markets, community gardens, places that exist outside their network. Some of us made it out, started colonies, living like it's the past because the future belongs to them now. Behind us, the city was waking up. Delivery drivers emerging from nowhere. Static figures reforming. The system resetting. Go! Jennifer pushed me forward. I'll delay them, give you time. Come with me. She smiled sadly, held up her arm. Her skin was flickering, static creeping up from her fingertips. I've been in the system too long, ate too many of their meals. But you still have a chance. Run, find the others, and whatever you do, she gripped my shoulders. Never order delivery again. Never let them know where you are. Cook, grow, share, but never summon them. I ran. Behind me, I heard her scream. A sound that turned to static, then silence. I found them 3 days later, the free ones, living in an old farm commune outside the city. They welcomed me, taught me to grow food, to cook over fire, to share meals that no app could ever deliver. But at night, I still hear the notifications, still feel my phone buzz with phantom deliveries. The apps are still out there, spreading. Every 5-star review feeds them. Every successful delivery strengthens their network. And sometimes, when I'm very quiet, I can hear them. The synchronized eating, the endless feast. All those people trapped at tables, feeding things that hunger for human experience. They're still down there, still eating, still spreading. And they're waiting for you to place your next order. So, let me ask you something. And be honest. When was the last time you cooked your own meal? Really cooked, not microwaved, not reheated, but actually prepared food with your own hands? 'Cause if you can't remember, if you've been living on delivery apps, checking your door for bags that appear from nowhere, tasting food that's impossibly fresh, you might already be selected. Check your phone. Any strange notifications? Any special delivery messages? Any food appearing that you didn't order? They're patient. They've been around since the first human decided to share a meal. But now, with our technology, our convenience culture, our endless appetite for instant gratification, they don't have to hunt anymore. We deliver ourselves right to them, one order at a time. Sweet dreams. And whatever you do, don't answer the door when the next delivery arrives. Because now that you know about them, they know about you too. Listen, do you hear that? That notification sound? Check your door, I dare you. Story number 2. The envelope was wet with morning dew when I pulled it from my mailbox, addressed to someone who'd been dead for 37 years. That should have been my first warning to leave Cedar Falls, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to understand something. This isn't just another ghost story. What I'm about to share will make you question every piece of mail you've ever received. And if you're listening to this alone, in the dark, you might want to check your own mailbox when I'm done. Because once you know the truth, you'll never look at those innocent white envelopes the same way again. Hit that subscribe button now. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. The story begins now. I inherited the house on Maple Street from my great-aunt Eleanor last spring. It was one of those classic American colonials. White shutters, wraparound porch, the kind of place Norman Rockwell would have painted. The realtor called it charming and full of character. I should have asked what kind of character. Moving from my cramped Chicago apartment to small-town Minnesota felt like stepping into a different world. Cedar Falls had that postcard-perfect quality. Population, 8,432. Everyone knew everyone. Saturday, farmers markets, and Friday night football games at the high school. The mailbox stood at the end of my gravel driveway. One of those old-fashioned ones with the red flag and peeling black paint. Number 4,782 barely visible on the side. My first week there. I painted it forest green to match the shutters. made it mine, you know? That's when the letters started. The first one arrived on a Tuesday. I remember because I'd just gotten back from Hannigan's hardware store, arms full of painting supplies for the kitchen renovation. The envelope sat there among the usual junk mail and utility bills, yellowed with age, addressed in shaky handwriting to Mrs. Dorothy Whitman. I asked around. Martha at the post office, she'd worked there 43 years, told me Dorothy Whitman had lived in my house back in the 80s. Died in 1987. Lung cancer. Strange, Martha said, adjusting her glasses. We don't usually get mail for folks that long gone. Must have gotten mixed up in the system somehow. I threw it away, didn't think much of it. But 3 days later, another one arrived. Same yellowed paper, same shaky handwriting. This time addressed to Mr. Harold Jennings. Martha's face went pale when I showed her. Harold Jennings, she whispered. He built that house, back in 1952. Died in a car accident on a Highway 52. Must have been, Lord, 1971. The way she looked at me, like I'd brought something contagious into her post office. It made my skin crawl. Probably just some prank, I said. But my voice didn't sound convinced, even to me. Over the next 2 weeks, 7 more letters arrived, each one addressed to a different former resident, each one on that same aged paper that felt brittle between my fingers. Mrs. Catherine Holbrook, 1963, Mr. George Patterson, 1984, Miss Linda Chen, 1996. All dead. All had lived in my house. I started keeping them in a shoebox under my bed. Don't ask me why. Something about throwing them away felt wrong, like discarding someone's last words. Then came the morning that changed everything. October 15th, 6:47 a.m. I know the exact time because I just checked my phone, scrolling through emails in bed when I heard it. The metallic creak of the mailbox opening. Mail doesn't come until 2 p.m. in Cedar Falls. Everyone knows that. Jerry, our mailman, he's like clockwork. Has been for 20 years. I crept to my bedroom window, peered through the curtains. The street was empty. Gray dawn light filtered through the maple trees, casting long shadows across my lawn. The mailbox stood closed, flag down, looking perfectly normal. But I knew what I'd heard. My bare feet were cold against the hardwood as I made my way downstairs. Through the living room, out the front door, the morning air bit at my skin. That sharp October cold that makes you realize summer's really gone. The gravel crunched under my feet as I walked down the driveway. Each step felt heavier than the last. My heart, it was doing this weird flutter thing, like when you're about to open test results or a college acceptance letter. I reached for the mailbox handle and stopped. What if someone was watching? What if this was exactly what they wanted? To see me take the bait. I glanced around. Mrs. Henderson's house across the street sat dark. The Johnsons' pickup truck was already gone. Ted always left for the lumber mill before dawn. Just me and the mailbox. I opened it, inside a single envelope, but this one was different. Crisp, new, white as fresh snow, and the name on it, Sarah Mitchell, my name, my maiden name. The one I hadn't used since my divorce 3 years ago. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside, a single sheet of paper. The writing was different too, not shaky and aged, but flowing. Beautiful, like calligraphy. Dear Sarah, welcome home. We've been waiting for you. The others want to meet you, but I told them to be patient. You're not ready yet. Soon, you'll understand why the house chose you. Why Eleanor left it to you specifically. She knew what you were. What you could do, for now, just listen. They have so much to tell you. So many stories left unfinished. So many words left unsaid. The mailbox is the bridge. You are the keeper. Don't throw away their letters anymore, they don't like that. Sincerely, the first resident. I stood there in my pajamas, cold October wind cutting through the thin fabric, reading those words over and over. The rational part of my brain screamed that this was a prank. Had to be. Maybe some local kids who'd heard about the new out-of-towner. Small towns. They don't always take kindly to strangers. But the other part of my brain, the part that noticed things, it was putting pieces together. The way the house had felt right the moment I'd stepped inside. The way I'd known exactly which bedroom had been Eleanor's without anyone telling me. The way I sometimes heard whispers in the walls at night, dismissed as old pipes and settling wood. I went back inside, made coffee with shaking hands, sat at my kitchen table, the one I'd found at an estate sale that looked exactly like the one from my childhood, and stared at that letter. The keeper of what? A bridge to where? That afternoon, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I went to the Cedar Falls Library, asked Agnes, the librarian who'd probably worked there since the Dewey Decimal System was invented, about my house. "Oh, the old Jennings place," she said, her voice dropping to that tone people use when they're about to share gossip. "That house has history." She pulled out a manila folder from behind her desk. Inside, newspaper clippings going back decades. Harold Jennings's car accident. Dorothy Whitman's obituary. A fire in 1978 that killed the Brennan family. A suicide in 1993. Lot of tragedy in those walls, Agnes said. But then, lot of joy too. The Pattersons had 6 children there. The Chens hosted the whole neighborhood every Christmas. Your great-aunt Eleanor, she used to say the house collected stories. Collected stories? Agnes leaned in closer. I could smell her lavender perfume. She said every house holds memories, but some houses hold them tighter than others. Some houses don't let go. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the old house made me jump. Every whisper of wind through the window sounded like voices. At 3 a.m., I gave up. Grabbed the shoebox of letters from under my bed and spread them out on my living room floor. 9 envelopes. 9 names. 9 people who'd lived and died. All connected by this house. I picked up Dorothy Whitman's letter first, held it up to the lamplight. The paper was so thin I could almost see through it. My fingers trembled as I opened it. The letter inside was blank. I checked another. Harold Jennings. Also blank, all of them, every single letter, empty. But as I sat there, surrounded by blank pages, something strange happened. Words began to appear. Faint at first, like pencil marks so light you could barely see them, then darker, clearer. Dorothy's letter filled first, "My roses. Please tell someone about my roses. They're dying without me. Pink twilight variety. Planted them the year Richard proposed. Northeast corner of the garden. They need bone meal in spring. Please." Harold's was next, the foundation. Southeast corner. I made a mistake in the measurements. It's been settling wrong for decades. Someone needs to know before it's too late, one by one. The letters filled with words. Confessions, warnings. Love notes never sent. Recipes never shared. George Patterson wrote about a baseball he'd hidden in the attic wall. Signed by Mickey Mantle, for his grandson who'd never gotten to visit. Linda Chen's letter contained GPS coordinates and a single line. I buried it here. She deserves to know the truth. I sat there until dawn, reading their words. These weren't ghost stories. They were human stories. Unfinished business, things left unsaid. The next day, I did something that probably sounds crazy. I started following their instructions. I found Dorothy's rose garden, overgrown and wild behind the shed. The pink twilight roses were there, struggling but alive. I spent all afternoon clearing weeds and adding bone meal to the soil. In the attic, behind a loose board exactly where George had described, I found the baseball. a genuine 1952 Mickey Mantle signature. I tracked down George's grandson in California through Facebook. When I messaged him about it, he called me crying. His grandfather had promised him that baseball when he was 8. He'd thought it was just another broken promise. The GPS coordinates from Linda Chen's letter led me to a spot under the big oak tree in the backyard. 3 feet down, I found a metal box, inside adoption papers and a letter. Linda had given up a baby in 1973, the daughter she'd never told. I'm still trying to figure out what to do with that information, but it was Harold's warning that scared me most. I called a structural engineer, told him I wanted a routine inspection. When he examined the southeast corner of the foundation, his face went white. "Ma'am, this whole corner is about to give way. Another few months, maybe less. This wall would have collapsed. Could have taken half the house with it. The repair cost me $12,000, but it saved the house." That night, the letters stopped coming. For exactly 1 week, my mailbox held only normal mail, bills, grocery store circulars, a birthday card from my mom. I started to think maybe it was over. Maybe I'd done what they needed. I was wrong. The next batch came all at once, October 29th, 6:47 a.m. again. That same metallic creak woke me. This time, I didn't hesitate. I ran downstairs and out to the mailbox. 20 letters, all different names, all people I didn't recognize. But these weren't addressed to former residents. The addresses were different too. 4780 Maple Street, 4784 Maple Street, 4923 Maple Street. These were for the whole neighborhood. I spent that day on my laptop, researching names, cross-referencing death records. These people had all lived on Maple Street, different houses, different decades, but all dead, and all of them had unfinished business. Mrs. Ethel Garrison, from 4780, had hidden money in her basement wall during the Depression. Her great-granddaughter was about to lose the house to foreclosure. Mr. James Okoye, from 4923, had written a novel by hand, pages hidden in his attic. His widow had always wondered what he'd spent all those late nights working on. Letter after letter, story after story, all of them trusting me, a stranger with their secrets. But why me? Why my mailbox? The answer came on Halloween night. I wasn't planning to hand out candy. First Halloween in a new town. I figured I'd keep the porch light off and pretend I wasn't home. But by 6 p.m., kids were already knocking. Spider-Men and princesses and zombies. Their parents hovering at the end of my driveway with flashlights. I scrambled to find something to give them. Ended up raiding my emergency chocolate stash. The kids didn't seem to mind that I was handing out fancy dark chocolate instead of fun-sized Snickers. Around 8 p.m., after the stream of trick-or-treaters had died down, I was about to turn off the porch light when I saw her. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, standing at the end of my driveway in an old-fashioned white dress. No costume that I could tell, unless she was going as a child from the 1950s. She was alone. No parents, no flashlight, just standing there by my mailbox. "Hey, sweetie," I called out. "Where are your parents?" She didn't answer, just stood there, one small hand resting on my mailbox. I grabbed the last of my chocolate and walked down the driveway. As I got closer, I noticed how pale she was. Her dress wasn't a costume. It was real vintage, the kind with hand-sewn details my grandmother would have made. "Are you lost?" I asked. She looked up at me with the biggest brown eyes I'd ever seen. "I'm not lost," she said. Her voice was strange, formal, like kids don't talk anymore. "I live here." "Here? On Maple Street?" She nodded. "I've always lived here, in all the houses, in none of the houses." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the October air. "What's your name?" "Elizabeth, but everyone called me Birdie." She smiled. and it was the saddest smile I'd ever seen on a child. I was the first. The first what? The first to die on Maple Street, 1923, Spanish flu. I was 7. She said it matter-of-factly, like she was telling me her favorite color. But I didn't want to leave. I loved this street so much. The trees, the houses, the people. So I stayed. I should have run, should have been terrified. But instead, I knelt down to her level. You're the one who's been sending the letters. She nodded. The others, they get stuck sometimes, between here and there. They have things to say, but no way to say them. I help them. But why my mailbox? Why me? Bertie tilted her head, studying me. Don't you know? Haven't you figured it out yet? I shook my head. Your great-aunt Eleanor, she could see me, just like you can. It runs in families sometimes. The ability to see what others miss, to hear what others can't. She paused. Eleanor helped us for 43 years, delivered our messages, finished our stories. Now it's your turn. I don't understand. You're saying Eleanor was the keeper, just like her mother before her, and her grandmother before that. Your family has been connected to this street since it was built. You think it was coincidence that Eleanor left you this specific house? My mind raced. Great Aunt Eleanor, who'd never married, never had kids, but had always sent me birthday cards with pressed flowers inside, who'd told me stories about talking to invisible friends when I visited as a child, who my mother had whispered about, called touched and different. The mailbox is special, Bertie continued. It's a threshold between your world and ours. The dead can't cross over, but our words can. Through the mailbox, through the keeper. And if I don't want to be the keeper? Bertie's face fell. Then they stay stuck, forever, with no one to hear them, no one to help them. She looked down at her little hands. I'll stay stuck too. A car drove by, headlights sweeping across us. In that brief illumination, Bertie flickered, like a TV with bad reception. There, 1 second, translucent the next, solid again. I should go, she said. The others are waiting. We have more letters to send. Wait, I called out. But she was already fading. How many are there? How many stuck souls? Her voice came as a whisper on the wind. All of them. Everyone who ever loved this street, this town. We're all here, waiting. And then she was gone. I stood there in my driveway, chocolate melting in my hand, staring at my forest green mailbox. In the distance, I could hear parents calling kids home. Normal Halloween sounds. Normal life continuing around me. But nothing would ever be normal again. That night, I made a decision. I pulled out a notebook and started writing down everything. Every letter, every name, every story. If I was going to be the keeper, I was going to do it right. The next morning, 57 letters waited in my mailbox. November became a blur of other people's lives. I developed a routine, wake up at 6:47 a.m., because that's when they always came. Collect the letters, spend my morning reading them, researching the names, planning my day around their requests. Some were simple. Tell someone about a hidden photograph. Return a borrowed book to the library, 40 years late. Plant bulbs in a specific spot where a garden used to be. Others were complex. Reconcile estranged family members. Solve decades-old mysteries. One letter led me to evidence that cleared a man's name 20 years after he died in prison for a crime he didn't commit. The town started to notice. People whispered when I walked into the corner cafe, pointed when I knocked on doors with strange requests. But they also started seeking me out. I heard you found the garrison money. Mrs. Chen from the grocery store cornered me one day. My grandmother always said there was something special about that house, about the women who lived there. Even Martha at the post office changed her tune. Maybe it's not such a bad thing, she said, sliding a box of antique stamps across the counter. These were my mother's. She died before she could give them to her sister. They had a falling out, never made up. Would you? I delivered those stamps. Watched two elderly sisters cry and hug for the first time in 30 years. But it wasn't all heartwarming reunions. Some letters contained dark secrets, confessions of affairs, hidden crimes, buried guilt. I became a keeper of secrets I never wanted to know. And then there was the cost. I started seeing them. Not just Birdie, all of them, flickers in my peripheral vision, shadows in mirrors, voices in empty rooms. The more letters I delivered, the thinner the veil became. Dorothy Whitman pruning invisible roses in my garden at midnight. Harold Jennings checking the foundation. Over and over, trapped in an endless loop of worry. George Patterson sitting in my living room, watching baseball games that only he could see. They didn't interact with me, not directly, but they were there, always there. My house had become Grand Central Station for the dead. Sleep became impossible. I'd lie in bed listening to footsteps on floors that shouldn't creak under invisible weight. Conversations in languages I didn't recognize. Sometimes crying, sometimes laughter. Always just out of reach. By December, I was exhausted, running on coffee and determination. I'd lost 15 pounds. My mother called daily, worried about the strain in my voice. Maybe you should come home for a while, she suggested. That old house, it can't be good for you, alone out there. But I wasn't alone. That was the problem. December 15th, exactly 2 months after the first letter. I hit my breaking point. The letters that morning weren't requests. They were demands. Angry words from souls who'd been waiting too long, who had stories that were too hard to resolve, too painful to face. One man wanted me to tell his son about a second family. A woman needed me to reveal that her sister's death wasn't an accident. Another begged me to dig up something that should stay buried, literally. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by their pain, and broke down, sobbed until my ribs hurt, until my eyes burned. I can't do this, I said to the empty room. It's too much, too heavy. I'm one person. I can't save everyone. I can't fix everything. The room grew cold. My breath came out in visible puffs. Frost spread across the windows despite the furnace running. And then I saw her. Not Birdie, Eleanor. My great-aunt stood in the doorway, looking exactly as I remembered from childhood. Gray hair in a neat bun, soft cardigan, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. But I could see through her to the hallway beyond. "Sarah," she said, and her voice was like wind chimes. "My dear girl." "Aunt Eleanor," my voice cracked. I can't do this. It's killing me." She crossed the room, sat in the chair across from me. Her presence made the air shimmer. "I know, sweetheart. I know exactly how heavy it is. I carried it for 43 years. She reached out, her translucent hand hovering over mine. I could almost feel warmth. "But you're stronger than you think, stronger than I was. How did you do it? How did you not go crazy?" She smiled. "Who says I didn't? Your mother certainly thought I had. The whole family did." Her expression grew serious. "But here's what I learned. You don't have to carry it all. You can't save everyone. Some souls aren't ready to move on. Some stories aren't meant to be resolved. You have to set boundaries." Boundaries? With the dead? Especially with the dead, they have nothing but time. But you have a life to live. 1 letter a day. That's what I finally limited myself to. 1 soul, 1 story, the rest have to wait their turn. And they accepted that? What choice did they have? Eleanor's form flickered. "The keeper makes the rules. Without you, they have nothing." Most will understand. The ones who don't, well, anger fades, even in death. Eventually, I wiped my eyes. Why didn't you warn me? Prepare me? Would you have believed me? Would you have come if you'd known? She shook her head. Some things you have to discover for yourself, but I'm sorry for the burden I've placed on you. I miss you, I whispered. I'm right here, sweetheart. I'll always be here. This house, this street, it's full of love. Yes, there's pain and regret and unfinished business, but there's also so much love. These souls trust us with their deepest truths. That's a gift. She started to fade. Wait, don't go. One more thing. Her voice was barely a whisper. Check the attic. Behind the chimney, I left something for you. And then she was gone. The room warmed. The frost melted from the windows. But I felt different. Lighter, somehow. I climbed to the attic, behind the brick chimney, wrapped in plastic. I found a journal. Eleanor's journal. 43 years of entries, names, stories, lessons learned. The first entry was dated 1981. Today I discovered what I am, what our family has always been. Keepers of the threshold, guardians of unfinished stories. I'm terrified, but also strangely honored. The dead trust us with their truth. How remarkable is that? The last entry was dated a week before she died. Sarah will be the next keeper. I've seen it in dreams. She has the gift, stronger than mine, stronger than any of us. She'll resist at first. They always do, but she'll find her way. She'll find the balance. And maybe, just maybe, she'll find a way to help Birdie finally cross over. The first soul, the loneliest soul, the one who's been waiting the longest. I closed the journal, went back downstairs, looked at the pile of angry letters on my kitchen table. One a day, I said out loud. That's the rule. One soul, one story, the rest wait their turn. The house seemed to sigh. Or maybe that was just the wind. I selected a letter at random. Mrs. Patricia Vance, 4856 Maple Street, died 2003. She wanted her daughter to know about a recipe hidden in a cookbook. Her mother's stuffing recipe that her daughter had been trying to recreate for 20 years. Simple, manageable, human. I put the rest of the letters in a box, wrote "waiting" on the side, put it in the closet. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept through till dawn. Over the next months, I found my rhythm. One letter a day, sometimes simple, sometimes complex, but always meaningful to someone. I helped a man find his father's purple heart, hidden in a wall for safekeeping and forgotten. Reunited a woman with her childhood diary, revealing dreams she'd forgotten she'd had. Delivered apologies, shared recipes, revealed treasures, mended relationships. The town stopped whispering, started understanding. People would nod respectfully when they saw me. Sometimes they'd approach with questions. Have you heard from? Could you ask if? Would it be possible? I became the bridge between two worlds, the keeper of the threshold. But Birdie remained, always by the mailbox, always waiting. One night in February, I found her there again. Same white dress, same sad eyes. Why haven't you crossed over? I asked. The others, once their business is finished, they move on, but not you. She looked down at her small hands. I don't have unfinished business, I just don't want to go. This is my home. These are my people, even if they can't see me. But don't you want peace? Don't you want to rest? What if there's nothing there? Her voice was so small. What if I cross over and it's just nothing? At least here I can help, I can matter. I knelt down, looked into those brown eyes that had seen a century pass. Oh, Birdie, Elizabeth, you've been the guardian for so long. You've helped so many souls find peace. Don't you think it's your turn? But who will help them if I go? Who will make sure the letters get through? I will. That's my job now. You trained me well. I smiled. Maybe it's time to trust me, to trust that this will continue without you. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, will you remember me? Always. I'll write your story in Eleanor's journal. Elizabeth Bertie Morrison. 1916 to 1923. The first keeper. The one who stayed out of love. Something shifted in her face. A loosening. A letting go. Maybe, she whispered. Maybe I am tired. The air around her began to shimmer. Not the unstable flicker I'd grown used to, but something else. Something warmer. I think, her voice was wonder-filled. I think I can see it. The other side, it's beautiful. And they're waiting. All the ones who crossed over, they're waiting for me. Light began to emanate from her small form. Soft at first, then brighter. Thank you, she said. Thank you for seeing me, for making me real again. Thank you, I replied, tears streaming down my face, for showing me what I am, what I'm meant to do. She smiled, a real smile this time, full of joy, and then she was gone, not faded, not flickered, gone, crossed over, at peace. The mailbox stood empty and silent. That was 6 months ago. The letters still come, but less frequently now. Word has spread in the spirit world. There's an order to things. A patience. A trust that their stories will be heard when the time is right. I've filled 3 journals now. Hundreds of stories. Thousands of secrets. A town's worth of unfinished business slowly being resolved. Sometimes I see Eleanor in the garden. She smiles and waves but doesn't speak. She's at peace too, knowing the tradition continues. And every Halloween, I leave my porch light on. I hand out full-size candy bars now. The good stuff, because you never know which child might grow up to be a keeper, which one might need to know that the strange things they see and hear are real, are important, are a gift. The house on Maple Street isn't just my home now, it's a sanctuary, a threshold. A place where the living and the dead can finally finish their conversations. And I am the keeper, the listener, the bridge. Some nights, when the moon is full and the air is still, I stand by my forest green mailbox and whisper a thank you to Bertie, the first soul, the bravest soul, the one who showed us all how to hold on, and more importantly, how to let go. If you're still listening, still awake, I want you to know something. That strange feeling you get sometimes, like someone's trying to tell you something, that odd coincidence that leads you to exactly what you need to find, that might be one of us, the keepers, helping a soul finish their story. We're everywhere, in every town, on every street. Ordinary people with an extraordinary purpose, and maybe, just maybe, one day you'll find a letter in your mailbox that doesn't belong. A message from someone long gone. When that happens, don't throw it away. Read it, act on it, become part of the bridge. Because everyone deserves to have their story heard. Everyone deserves to find peace. Even the dead. Especially the dead. Sweet dreams. And don't forget to check your mailbox in the morning. You never know what might be waiting. Is the keeper real? Are the letters real? That's for you to decide. But I'll tell you this, every town has its secrets. Every house has its history, and every mailbox, well, every mailbox might just be a doorway to something more. Thank you for listening to my story. Comment below if you've ever received a letter you couldn't explain. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe, because this is just the beginning. The dead have so many more stories to tell, and I'm just getting started. Story number 3. Listen closely. Can you hear it? That tinny melody drifting through your neighborhood right now? Is it playing forward or backward? Before you answer, let me tell you what happened in Millbrook, Pennsylvania last summer. Because after you hear this, You'll never look at an ice cream truck the same way again. And if you're watching this alone at night, maybe check your windows first. I'm serious. All right, the story begins now. The first time I heard it, I was unpacking boxes in my new house on Sycamore Street. Mid-July heat was brutal that day. The kind that makes the asphalt shimmer and your shirt stick to your back before 9 in the morning. I just moved from Philadelphia to this quiet suburb called Millbrook, about 40 minutes outside the city. Needed a fresh start after the divorce. You know how it is. The melody came drifting through my open windows around 3 in the afternoon. At first, I smiled. Ice cream truck music always takes you back, doesn't it? But something was off. The notes seemed to drag, like a record player running too slow. Then I realized. No, not slow, the tune was playing backward. Turkey in the Straw, I think it was supposed to be, but reversed. It sounded almost mournful, like a lullaby for something that shouldn't be sleeping. I went to the window, expecting to see some beat-up van with a broken speaker system. What I saw instead made me pause. The truck was pristine, not new exactly, but preserved, like those vintage cars you see at shows. Every detail perfect. Soft serve swirls painted on the sides in pastel colors that somehow looked faded, even in the bright sun. The driver. I couldn't quite make out his face through the tinted windshield. The truck rolled past at maybe 5 miles per hour. Kids should have been running out. Right, middle of summer, 3 o'clock, ice cream truck. But the street stayed empty, even Mrs. Chen next door, who was watering her petunias, just kept watering, like she didn't hear it at all, that night. I asked her about it while taking out the trash. Ice cream truck? She looked at me funny. Haven't seen one of those around here in years. Honey, not since. She trailed off, shook her head. Well, not in years. I didn't push it. People get weird about random things sometimes. But the next day, same time, I heard it again. That backward melody, slow and wrong. This time, I was ready. Grabbed my wallet and headed outside. The truck was already halfway down the block, but I jogged after it. Waving, it didn't stop. Didn't even slow down. It just kept rolling at that same crawling pace, the music box tune playing in reverse, notes falling instead of rising. I stood there in the middle of the street, feeling oddly rejected, like when you wave at someone you think you know and they just look through you. By the 4th day, I was determined. Set up a lawn chair on my porch at 2:45, waited with a $20 bill in my hand. Sure enough, 3 p.m. sharp. I heard it. The truck turned onto Sycamore from Elm Avenue. I was already at the curb, arm raised, as it approached. I finally got a good look at the driver. He was maybe 60, wearing one of those paper service caps they used to have. His face was pleasant enough, I guess, but his eyes never moved, just stared straight ahead through the windshield, and his hands on the wheel. They were so pale they almost glowed. "Hey!" I called out. "Hey, ice cream!" The truck kept rolling, but as it passed, the driver's head turned, just his head, not his shoulders or body, turned until he was looking directly at me. His mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear over the backward music. Then he smiled. I've seen a lot of smiles in my life. Happy ones, sad ones, fake ones. This wasn't any of those. This was the smile of someone who knew something terrible and thought it was funny. The truck continued down the street, and I stood there with my 20 getting damp in my sweaty palm. That night, I couldn't sleep, kept hearing that reversed melody in my head. Around 2 a.m., I gave up and made some chamomile tea, while waiting for the water to boil. I Googled Millbrook, PA ice cream truck. What I found made my hands go cold. A newspaper article from 1987, Local ice cream vendor missing after bizarre incident. Raymond Marsh, 43, had operated an ice cream truck in Millbrook for 15 years. July 18, 1987. Multiple residents reported his truck playing strange, distorted music. When police investigated, they found the truck parked behind the abandoned Woolworths on Main Street. Engine running. Music box still playing. No sign of Raymond. But here's the part that made me close my laptop. The article mentioned that in the weeks before his disappearance, several children had reported feeling sick and dizzy after eating ice cream from his truck. One parent, Martha Hensley, claimed her daughter Emma wouldn't stop talking about the backwards man who serves tomorrow's ice cream. I tried to find more information, but that was it, one article. No follow-up, like the whole thing just got forgotten. I didn't hear the truck for 3 days after that. Started to think maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe the stress from the move, the divorce, starting over. Maybe my mind was playing tricks. Then on Tuesday, I heard it again. But this time, it was different. This time. It was 3 a.m. I woke to that backward melody drifting through my bedroom window. For a moment, still half asleep, I thought I was dreaming. Then I heard it clearly. Turkey in the Straw, in reverse. Notes descending into something that sounded almost like a warning. I crept to the window, heart hammering. The street was empty except for pools of yellow streetlight. No truck, but the music was getting louder. Then I saw it, not on the street, in my driveway. The pristine white truck sat there, engine off, but music still playing from speakers I couldn't see. The serving window was open. Inside, darkness, but not empty darkness. The kind of dark that has weight, that watches. I should have called the police, should have stayed inside, locked the doors. Instead, I found myself walking downstairs. My feet moved on their own, bare against the cold hardwood. The front door opened without me touching the handle. The night air hit me like water, thick and humid. Crickets had gone silent. Even the wind held its breath. Just that backward music, pulling me forward. As I approached the truck, the music began to slow. Notes stretched like taffy, deeper and deeper. By the time I reached the serving window, it sounded like whale songs from the bottom of the ocean. "You've been calling me." The voice came from the darkness inside the truck. Not Raymond's voice. If that even was Raymond driving. This voice was older, much older. Every day at 3, calling and calling. I just wanted some ice cream. My voice sounded small, childish. A laugh like ice cubes dropping into an empty glass. Ice cream. Is that what you think this is about? A hand emerged from the darkness, pale as milk, holding a soft-serve cone. The ice cream was white, too white, and it moved, swirled on its own like smoke. "Eat it," the voice commanded. "You've been so eager. Eat it and see." I reached for the cone. My fingers were inches away when every dog in the neighborhood started barking at once. The spell broke. I stumbled backward, and the cone fell, hitting the driveway with a sound like breaking glass. The ice cream spread across the concrete, but it didn't melt. It grew. Branches of white spreading like frost on a window, reaching for my feet. I ran. Behind me, the backward music resumed, faster now, almost angry. I slammed the door and watched from the window as the truck sat there for another hour. The ice cream on my driveway glowed faintly in the darkness, pulsing like something alive. When the sun came up, both the truck and the ice cream were gone, but the concrete where it had touched was bleached white. Still is. I started asking around town, carefully. Most people just gave me blank looks when I mentioned an ice cream truck, but a few, the older residents, their faces would change. Recognition, then fear, then denial. finally. Mr. Lewandowski at the hardware store pulled me aside. He'd lived in Millbrook for 70 years. His hands shook as he told me about the summer of 1963. 5 kids, he whispered. 5 kids bought ice cream from that truck. They didn't die. No. But they changed. Started talking backward, writing backward. Then they started knowing things. Things that hadn't happened yet. Little Emma Hensley. She was one of them. Told her mother about a fire at the school 3 days before it happened. Described it perfectly. Right down to which classroom. He leaned closer. They had to send those kids away. Special hospital up in Boston. Don't know what happened to them after that, but the truck kept coming. Every summer, taking 1 or 2, always children at first. Then it started getting hungrier. What about Raymond, the driver who disappeared? Mr. Lewandowski's face went pale. Raymond tried to stop it. Figured out the truck wasn't really a truck. It was more like a lure. Like those fish that dangle lights to attract prey. Raymond tried to destroy it, and it took him instead. Some say he's still in there, not driving, just part of it now. He grabbed my wrist suddenly. His fingers were ice cold despite the warm day. There's more. Things I didn't want to remember. My brother Frank, he was one of the investigating officers in '87, found something in Raymond's truck that the papers never mentioned. The old man looked around the empty store, then continued. A journal. Raymond had been keeping track. Every person who heard the backward music more than 7 times, and they started changing. First, you hear tomorrow's echoes. Then you start tasting colors, smelling time, the ice cream. It's not really ice cream, it's condensed moments, frozen possibilities. What happened to the journal? Frank took it home, started reading it. 3 days later, he was talking backward at dinner. My sister-in-law found him in the garage at 3 a.m., building something, said he was making a time freezer to store next week's groceries. They had to institutionalize him. Mr. Lewandowski released my wrist. Before they took him away, he grabbed me, looked right through me with these eyes that had seen too much, said, "The truck feeds on the space between seconds, and brother, we're all just seconds waiting to be swallowed." I thanked him and left, my mind reeling. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard children laughing in reverse. Joyful sounds played backward become something else entirely. They become warnings. I started keeping my own journal, documenting everything. The times, the patterns, the things I was beginning to notice, like how the birds went silent exactly 3 minutes before the truck appeared, or how the temperature dropped 7 degrees in its wake, or how the grass where it parked grew in spirals for weeks after. On day 10 of my documentation, I noticed something else. My handwriting was changing. Not backward, not yet, but the letters leaned differently, like they were trying to fall into tomorrow. I drove to the library. Millbrook's archive section was dusty, forgotten. The librarian, a young woman named Jessica, seemed surprised anyone wanted to look at the old newspapers. 1963? She pulled out a box of yellowed microfilm. That's pretty far back. What are you looking for? Ice cream truck incidents, missing children, anything unusual from that summer. Her fingers paused on the microfilm reader. My grandmother used to tell stories about a summer when kids got sick from bad ice cream, but she said it wasn't food poisoning. Said they got sick in their minds, started seeing things that hadn't happened yet. She loaded the film. We scrolled through months of small-town news. Then I found it. July through September, 1963. 14 articles. Not about missing children, about children who were temporarily displaced. Tommy Morrison, age 8, found in the Millbrook Elementary cafeteria at 2 a.m. Claims he was attending school next Thursday. Parents report child has been describing in detail events that occur days later. Sarah Chen, age 10, discovered by police walking backward through downtown. When questioned, responded only in future tense. I will have been here yesterday. Group of 5 children found in Riverside Park constructing what they called a tomorrow fort. Structure defied basic physics, appeared to exist in multiple time frames simultaneously. Demolished by city order. Jessica was reading over my shoulder. Her breathing had quickened. This can't be real. I showed her the photo accompanying one article. 5 children standing in front of what looked like an ice cream truck, but the truck was translucent. You could see through it to the trees behind. And the children. Their shadows fell in impossible directions. Some toward the sun, some away, some into angles that shouldn't exist. Look at their eyes, I whispered. She leaned closer, then jerked back. They're not looking at the camera. They're looking at something behind it. No. Wait. They're looking at when the picture will be developed. They're seeing the future moment when someone would be looking at this photo. The microfilm reader suddenly sparked. The bulb burst in the brief flash. I saw something in the smoke, the shape of a truck, and in its window. A face that might have been Raymond's, or might have been mine. Jessica and I sat in the darkness for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice small. My grandmother, before she died, she said something strange. Said, "Beware the ice cream that tastes like tomorrow. Once you know what Tuesday tastes like, Monday will never satisfy you again." We left the library separately. I think we both knew we'd seen too much, known too much. The backward music was already playing in our heads. That night, I made a decision. I would confront it, whatever this thing was. I would face it. Better to know than to spend every day waiting, wondering, hearing phantom melodies in every passing car. I prepared salt circles, didn't know if they'd help, but figured they couldn't hurt. A camera with fresh batteries, a tape recorder, and a cooler. Because if I was going to get ice cream from tomorrow, I wanted to preserve it, study it, understand it. At 2:45 a.m., I sat on my porch. The night was thick with humidity. Crickets sang their ancient songs, normal sounds, until they weren't. 3 a.m. came like a cold hand on my shoulder. The crickets stopped mid-chirp, the wind held its breath, and then the backward music began, but this time, it wasn't coming from the street. It was coming from inside my house. I turned, and through my living room window, I saw it. The truck. Inside my house. Fitting impossible in a space too small. Its serving window facing my front door. The door opened on its own. I walked through, and suddenly I wasn't in my living room. I was in a space that flickered between my house and somewhere else. Somewhere that smelled like freezer burn and tasted like static. The serving window slid open. Inside, darkness moved like syrup. And from that darkness, a voice that might have been Raymond's, or might have been mine from next week. "You've been very persistent." The voice was amused. "Most people run after the third encounter. But you're different. You're already tasting it, aren't you? The flavor of moments not yet born." "What are you?" My voice sounded strange, like it was coming from next Tuesday. "I'm a service provider." A laugh like ice cracking. "I serve what people truly crave. Not ice cream, but possibility, the knowledge of tomorrow, the taste of next week, the texture of time itself." A menu appeared on the counter, but the items weren't ice cream flavors. They were temporal coordinates. Next Tuesday, 3:17 p.m., Vanilla Swirl. December 25th, 2029, Chocolate Chip Prophecy. The Day You Die, Rainbow Sherbet Surprise. Yesterday's Tomorrow, Soft Serve Twist. Choose. The voice urged. Everyone chooses eventually, even those who think they're refusing. They're just choosing to taste their tomorrows 1 second at a time. Why not take a bigger bite? My hand moved toward the menu. In the reflection of the serving window's steel counter, I saw my face, but older, younger, different ages flickering like a TV with bad reception. I know what you did to those children, I said, fighting the urge to order. To Raymond, to everyone. Did to them? The voice sounded genuinely puzzled. I gave them what they wanted, what everyone wants. To know, to see, to taste what's coming. The children understood faster than the adults. They always do. Their minds haven't yet learned that time only flows one way. But they went insane. Insane? Another laugh? Or did they just start experiencing reality as it truly is? Non-linear, all moments existing simultaneously, past and future just directions, like left and right. The ice cream doesn't drive you mad. It shows you that you've been mad all along, thinking time was a river when really it's an ocean. The menu pulsed. Items changed. Your mother's last words. Strawberry swirl. The winning lottery numbers, mint chip fortune. Your death. Prevented, cookies and cream salvation. Everyone wants to know. The voice continued. What happens next? What happened before? What's happening now in the places they can't see? I just provide the service, one scoop at a time. I felt my resolve weakening. The smell from the truck was intoxicating, like birthdays and funerals and first kisses all mixed together. Just one taste. I heard myself say. A cone appeared. White ice cream that swirled with the colors that didn't have names. I reached for it, and then I heard it. From upstairs, my phone ringing, but not ringing, playing its ringtone backward. The spell cracked. I jerked my hand back. Ah! The voice sounded disappointed. Still anchored to linear time. How limiting. But don't worry, I'm patient. I've got all the time in the world. All the time that was, is, and will be. The truck began to fade. But as it did, I saw him. Raymond, or what was left of him. He was part of the machinery now. His body twisted into the gears and pipes that made the ice cream. His eyes were windows into different decades. His mouth moved, forming words. Run, he said. Or maybe he would say, or had said, time doesn't work right around the truck. I blinked, and I was in my living room. Normal, empty, no truck, but on my coffee table, a napkin, and written on it in handwriting that might have been mine. See you next week, or last week. Time is funny that way. For 3 days, I didn't leave my house, didn't answer the phone, didn't even look out the windows, but I could feel it. The truck was out there, waiting. Patient as tomorrow, then yesterday. Or was it tomorrow? Time feels slippery now. I was at the grocery store, heard a kid in the cereal aisle talking to his mother. Mommy, the backwards man says tomorrow's ice cream tastes like the color 9. My blood went cold. I abandoned my cart and rushed outside. The truck was in the parking lot, but it looked different. Older. The paint was peeling. Rust showing through. The soft serve swirls on the side seemed to writhe if you didn't look directly at them. And there were children. A line of them. Waiting at the serving window. Their parents nowhere to be seen. I ran toward them, yelling for them to get away. But my voice came out backward. The words fell from my mouth in reverse. Meaningless sounds. The children turned to look at me. Their eyes were white. Soft serve white. He's ready now, they said in unison. The backwards man says you're ready now. I fled, drove home in a panic, ran inside, locked every door and window. But I can hear it now, as I'm telling you this, that backward melody getting closer. It's not 3 p.m., it's not 3 a.m. Time doesn't matter anymore, because I understand now. The truck doesn't come at specific times. It comes when you're ready, when you've heard the music enough times that it starts to make sense backward, when you begin to crave not the ice cream, but the knowing, the seeing of tomorrow, of next week, of moments that haven't breathed yet. My hands are getting cold as I type this. So cold, like I've been holding ice cream. The music is in my driveway again, but this time I'm not afraid, because I can hear what the backward notes are really saying. They're saying tomorrow has always been here. We just eat it one spoonful at a time. The serving window is opening. He's calling my name, not my name from today, but my name from next week, when I'll be different, when I'll understand why the ice cream has to be served cold enough to freeze time itself. If you hear the backward music in your neighborhood, don't run. Don't hide. Just remember, some trucks serve ice cream. This one serves tomorrow's. And tomorrow always tastes like the color 9. But wait, I need to tell you something else. Something I didn't mention. Because I wasn't sure if it was real or if I was already changing. 2 weeks before I heard the truck for the last time, I found something in my basement. While looking for boxes I hadn't unpacked, there was a door I hadn't noticed before, painted the same white as the walls, almost invisible. Behind it, a room, smaller than a closet, but somehow it felt vast. The walls were covered in children's drawings, crayon sketches of ice cream cones that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them, and in the center of each drawing, the same phrase, written in different hands, different ages. We serve tomorrow. There was a filing cabinet in the corner, rusted, locked, but the lock fell apart when I touched it, like it had been waiting. Inside, hundreds of order forms, not for ice cream, for moments. Timothy Blake, age 9, ordered, the day his father comes home. Delivered, never, payment, his ability to see the present. Sarah Winters, age 11, ordered, knowledge of next week's spelling test, delivered, complete, payment, can no longer spell words in correct temporal order. Emma Hensley, age 7, ordered, to see tomorrow. Delivered, in progress, payment, today, yesterday, and all linear time. The forms went back decades, maybe longer. The paper at the bottom of the cabinet was so old it crumbled at my touch, but I could make out dates: 1892, 1847, 1776. This thing, this truck, it had been serving its terrible desserts long before internal combustion engines, long before ice cream as we know it. At the very bottom, wrapped in what felt like frozen silk, was a photograph. Daguerreotype. Ancient. It showed a man with a cart, hand-painted sign reading temporal treats. And his face. It was the same face I'd seen driving the truck. Not similar, the same. Every line, every shadow. But the thing that made me drop the photo, that made my hands shake for hours after, was the background behind the cart. Buildings I recognized. Sycamore Street, my street, but the photo was dated 1851. And in one of the windows, a face watching. My face. I ran upstairs, slammed the basement door, but I could still feel that room down there, breathing, waiting, being yesterday and tomorrow at the same time. That night, I called my ex-wife, needed to hear a normal voice, to anchor myself to the present. Hello? She sounded tired. Janet, it's me. I just needed to talk to someone. Silence. Then, who is this? It's me, David. We were married for 12 years. "I don't know any, David. How did you get this number?" I hung up, my hands were shaking. Checked my phone. Her contact was there. Our wedding photos still in my cloud storage, but when I called again, the number was disconnected. I think I screamed then. Or maybe I will scream. Or already screamed. Time doesn't follow rules anymore. The next morning, I went to work. Tried to pretend everything was normal, but my coworkers looked at me strangely. Finally, my manager pulled me aside. "Are you feeling all right? You've been standing at the copier for 3 hours. Just standing there, humming something backward." I hadn't realized. The melody was in my head now, playing constantly, and I was spreading it, like a virus made of sound and time. I took sick leave, went home, found 17 messages on my answering machine, all from numbers I didn't recognize. All the same message, in children's voices. "The backwards man says you're almost ready. One more taste and you'll understand. The color 9 is waiting." I unplugged the machine, but the messages kept coming, through the dead speaker, through the walls, through the spaces between seconds. That's when I understood the real horror. It wasn't that the truck was supernatural. It wasn't that it served impossible ice cream. It was that it had always been here. We just agreed not to see it. All of us, collectively, decided that time only moves forward, that effects follow causes, that ice cream trucks serve ice cream. But some of us, we hear the backward music. We see the cracks in consensus reality. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. You become part of the service, another vendor of temporal treats. I've been fighting it, writing this story, trying to warn you. But even now, I can feel the words changing. What I wrote yesterday becomes different today. What I'll write tomorrow is already here. Do you want to know the worst part? The absolute worst part? I've been checking the comments on other videos, other stories, looking for signs, and I found them. Comments that talk about the color 9, about backwards music in their neighborhoods, about ice cream that tastes like tomorrow. It's spreading, through the stories, through the screen, through the spaces between words. And you who are listening, you've heard the backward music now, in the spaces between my words, in the pauses where I breathe. It's there, faint but growing stronger. Check your freezer tonight. That ice cream you don't remember buying, the one in the container with no label. That's not ice cream. That's concentrated tomorrow. Frozen possibility. A single spoonful of time itself. And once you taste it, once you know what the color 9 tastes like, you'll understand why the children lined up so eagerly. Why their eyes turned white as a soft serve. Why they spoke in unison about tomorrows that haven't happened yet. The truck isn't coming for you. You're already in it. We all are. Serving each other moments. Trades and exchanges of time. Every story you hear, every dream you have, every déjà vu, and that's just another transaction. Another cone of temporal ice cream passed through the window of perception. But there's hope. Maybe, if you hear the backward music, sing forward. If you see the truck, walk backward. If someone offers you tomorrow's ice cream, ask for yesterday's instead. Break the pattern. Refuse the service. Stay in today, even if today is all you'll ever have. Because the alternative is what I'm becoming. A vendor of temporal treats. A server of tomorrows. Another backwards man in an impossible truck. Delivering impossible ice cream to impossible children who see impossible things. The music is so loud now. So beautiful when you let it play backward. Each note a doorway. Each melody a map to when you weren't. Aren't. Won't be. I can see you, all of you, reading this, listening to this, experiencing this, not now, but in all your nows. The you from next week who will remember this. The you from last year who hasn't heard it yet. The you from tomorrow who wishes they could forget. We're all in the truck together. All serving. All being served. All tasting the impossible flavors of time itself. The color 9 tastes like your first kiss before it happens. The color 9 sounds like your last breath after it's taken. The color 9 feels like every moment. Frozen and served in a cone of possibility. And now you know. Now you've tasted it too. Through these words. Through this story. Through the spaces between what is and what will be. Welcome to the service. Welcome to the truck. Welcome to tomorrow. Wait, do you hear that? That tinny melody outside your window right now? Is it playing forward or backward? Don't answer too quickly. Listen carefully. Because once you hear it backward, really hear it, you can't unhear it. And the backwards man, he'll know. He always knows who's been listening. Check your driveways. Check them now. And whatever you do, whatever you see, don't eat the ice cream. Unless you're ready to taste tomorrow, unless you're ready to serve it too. Sweet dreams. Or should I say, sweet tomorrows. Because dreams, after all, are just ice cream we eat while sleeping. Soft serve scoops of things that haven't happened yet. Delivered fresh each night by the backwards man in the truck that never left. Never arrived. Always was. The color 9 is calling. Can you taste it yet? Story number 4. Seattle. November 23rd, 2087. April 9th, 2041. December 1st, 2024. That last one. That was tomorrow. I dropped $1 into his worn fedora and asked what the dates meant. But he just looked up at me with these pale gray eyes and said, "You've got time, Sarah. Plenty of time." I never told him my name. If you're listening to this, wondering if I'm still alive, well, stick around. Because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about fate, free will, and the thin line between knowing the future and creating it. And if you've ever passed a street performer without a second glance, you might want to think twice next time. The story begins now. Seattle mornings have this way of making everything feel like a dream. The mist rolls in from Puget Sound, mixing with the steam from 1,000 coffee cups, creating this ethereal fog that turns the whole city into something out of a fairy tale. That Tuesday morning was no different. Except for one thing, Marcus, that's what the other vendors called him, though nobody seemed to know his last name. He'd been performing on the same corner for about 3 weeks, always arriving before dawn, always leaving as the sun set. His act was simple, too simple. Really, he'd write dates in chalk, seemingly random dates, and people would toss coins, thinking it was some kind of street art, but I noticed something the others didn't. Every time someone dropped money in his hat, he'd look at them, really look at them, like he was reading something written on their face that nobody else could see. Then he'd nod, sometimes sadly, sometimes with what looked like relief, and add another date to his growing collection on the sidewalk. 27 years, he said to a jogger who barely slowed down to toss in a quarter. The jogger laughed, kept running. Marcus wrote, October 15th, 2051. I was working the morning shift at the original Starbucks, just across from his spot. During my break, I'd gotten my usual, a simple black coffee, nothing fancy, and decided to watch him work. That's when I noticed the pattern. Young people got distant dates, elderly folks got nearer ones, but not always. A teenager walked by. Couldn't have been more than 16. Marcus looked at him and his whole body tensed. He started to stand, like he wanted to say something, but the kid just walked past, ignoring him completely. Marcus sat back down and wrote, January 8th, 2025, 2 weeks away. You see it too, don't you? I jumped, nearly spilling my coffee. An older woman had sat down next to me on the bench, her eyes fixed on Marcus. "See what?" I asked, though my heart was already racing because, yeah, I did see it. "The way he knows," she said, pulling her cardigan tighter. "I've been watching him for days. My husband thinks I'm crazy, but—" She paused, fumbled in her purse, pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "Last week, he told me I had 12 years, 3 months, and 5 days. Then he asked me if I'd talked to my sister lately. So I haven't talked to my sister in 15 years. We had this stupid fight about our mother's jewelry when she passed." Her voice cracked. "I called her that night. We talked for 3 hours, cried for most of it. We're having lunch tomorrow." She stood up, smoothed her skirt. 12 years doesn't seem like much, but it's enough. Enough to fix things. After she left, I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my contacts. How many people had I lost touch with? How many relationships had I let fade because I assumed there'd always be more time? That's when Marcus called out to me. "Sarah, come here." My legs moved before my brain could stop them. Up close. He smelled like chalk dust and something else. Something old, like books in a library nobody visits anymore. "I don't usually do this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But you're different. You actually see what I'm doing. Most people, they think it's entertainment, street art, performance." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. If only it were that simple. "The dates," I said. "They're death dates, yes." He picked up a piece of chalk, rolled it between his fingers. "Started 3 years ago. Woke up one morning and just knew. Looked at my wife across the breakfast table and saw May 15th. 2021 floating above her head like some sick cosmic joke. My stomach dropped. Did she— brain aneurysm. Exactly on that date. Doctors said there was nothing anyone could have done. No warning signs. Just gone." He drew a small spiral on the concrete. "After that, I saw them everywhere. Every person I looked at, I could see their expiration date. That's—" I wanted to say impossible, but the word wouldn't come. The first time I saw him, he was drawing chalk numbers on the sidewalk outside Pike Place Market in a curse, a gift. I've called it both. He looked up at me then, those pale eyes seeming to look through me rather than at me. "But you want to know the real horror. Sarah, it's not seeing when people die, it's seeing when they die, and knowing some of them could be prevented. I should have walked away. Any rational person would have. But rationality had taken a back seat the moment he'd said my name without me telling him. So, instead, I sat down on the cold sidewalk next to him. 'A teenager,' I said. 'January 8th, that's preventable, yes. Car accident, corner of Pine and 5th, 6:47 p.m. He'll be texting. Driver will be reaching for their coffee, both distracted, both thinking they have all the time in the world.' Marcus drew the date again. Darker this time. I tried to warn him, but you saw how that went. You can't just tell people they're going to die. They'd think you're crazy. Oh, I learned that lesson the hard way. He pulled up his sleeve, showed me a faded hospital bracelet. Spent 6 months in Harborview psychiatric ward after I tried to warn a bunch of people. Doctors said I was having delusions of grandeur. Thought I was some kind of prophet. Another humorless laugh. Prophet, right. Prophets are supposed to save people. A businessman dropped a $5 bill in the hat. Marcus glanced up. 43 years, enjoy them, Thomas. The man froze. How did you? Your daughter's recital is Thursday. Don't miss it for the Peterson meeting. The deal will still be there Friday, but Thursday with her. That's irreplaceable. Thomas stood there, mouth open, then pulled out his phone. I heard him say, "Cancel the Peterson meeting," as he walked away. Sometimes they listen, Marcus said. When you give them something specific, something that matters now, not some far-off date they can't comprehend. But how do you know their names? How do you know about their lives? He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, same way I know you've been having the dreams. Sarah. The ones where you're standing in a room full of calendars, all showing different dates, all of them circled in red. My blood turned to ice. I had been having that dream for weeks now, ever since your grandmother passed, he finished. October 30th, you were holding her hand. She squeezed back 3 times. Your family's code for I love you. Then she looked at you, really looked at you, and you felt something shift, like she passed something to you along with that final squeeze. Tears burned my eyes. How could you possibly? Because she had it too, the sight. Skipped your mother, went straight to you. But yours is different, developing differently. He studied my face. You don't see death dates, do you? You see something else. I thought about the dreams, the calendars, the circled dates. And suddenly, life dates, I whispered. I see moments, important ones, the days that change everything. Marcus smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen from him. December 12th. That's what you see when you look at me, isn't it? I nodded. December 12th blazed in my mind like neon. 3 days away. What happens on December 12th? I asked. That's the question, isn't it? He stood, brushed chalk dust from his jeans. Come back tomorrow. Same time. There's something I need to show you. Someone you need to meet. He started packing up his chalk, then paused. Oh, and Sarah? That barista, Jake. The one who always draws the little flowers in your foam. His important date is February 14th, next year. He winked. Just thought you should know. I felt my face burn. Jake and I had been dancing around each other for months, neither of us making the first move. Tomorrow, Marcus said. 6 a.m. sharp. And Sarah, bring coffee, the good stuff. We're going to need it. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw dates floating in the darkness. December 12th pulsed like a heartbeat. What was going to happen to Marcus in 3 days? And why did he seem so accepting of it? At 5:45 a.m., I was standing outside the Starbucks with 2 cups of our darkest roast. The streets were empty except for a few early joggers and the delivery trucks making their rounds. Marcus was already there, but he wasn't alone. A woman sat next to him, elderly but elegant, wearing a purple scarf that looked hand-knitted. She was writing in a leather journal, and when she looked up at me, I gasped. Her eyes were completely white. No iris, no pupil, just white. This is Ava, Marcus said, taking one of the coffees gratefully. She's the one who helped me understand what was happening when it first started. Ava. This is Sarah, the one I told you about. Ava smiled, closed her journal. The granddaughter of Ruth Mackenzie. Yes, I knew your grandmother. Dear, wonderful woman, terrible poker player. She patted the ground next to her. Sit. We have much to discuss and not much time to discuss it. I sat, trying not to stare at her eyes. She seemed to sense my discomfort. The blindness came with the gift, she said. Fair trade, I thought. Lose the ability to see the world as it is, gain the ability to see how it might be. Marcus sees endings, you see beginnings. I see possibilities. Possibilities? The paths not taken, the words not said, the choices that could change everything. She opened her journal, showed me pages covered in intricate diagrams, connecting lines, dates, names. There are more of us than you might think. Sarah. People who see different aspects of time, of fate. We've been finding each other. Slowly. Carefully. Why carefully? I asked. Though I suspected I knew, Marcus answered. Because there are others who would use what we see for less noble purposes. 3 months ago, a woman in Portland who could see illness she disappeared. Her apartment was ransacked, her journals stolen. Week later, 3 pharmaceutical companies announced breakthrough drugs for diseases that hadn't even been properly diagnosed yet. "They're hunting us," Ava said simply. "Corporations, governments, people who think knowing the future means controlling it. They don't understand that seeing these things is meant to help people make better choices, not to manipulate outcomes for profit." A jogger passed. Ava tilted her head. "Turn left at Broadway," she called out. The jogger looked confused but shrugged and turned left. Ava smiled. She would have turned right, witnessed a mugging, tried to help, got stabbed. Now she'll take the left. See a lost dog, return it to its owner. Meet her future husband in the process. "Just like that?" I asked. "You changed her entire life." "No, dear. I showed her a possibility. She chose to take it." Ava reached into her bag, pulled out a card. "There's a meeting, Thursday night, others like us. We share what we've seen. Try to help where we can. Try to protect each other." I took the card. It had only an address, Pioneer Square, and a time, 7 p.m. "December 12th, I said suddenly, looking at Marcus. "What happens on December 12th? Marcus and Ava exchanged a look. "Show her," Ava said quietly. Marcus pulled out his phone, showed me a photo. It was a chalk drawing. But not like his usual dates, this was elaborate, detailed. A building on fire, people running, and in the corner, December 12th, 2:15 p.m. "The Paramount Theater," he said. "Electrical fire during the matinee showing. Faulty wiring that's been ignored for years. Inspections missed it, or were paid to miss it. 347 people in the theater. Exits blocked by construction equipment that shouldn't be there. I've seen it every night for the past month. The same vision. The same death dates all converging on one moment. So, we stop it," I said. "Call in a tip. Get the fire department there." "You think I haven't tried?" His voice was raw. "Anonymous tips get ignored. I tried being specific. They traced the call. Nearly arrested me for making threats. I can't change this. Sarah, I've accepted that. But maybe..." He looked at me, hope flickering in those pale eyes. "Maybe someone who sees beginnings instead of endings can find another way." December 12th burned brighter in my mind. But now I saw something else. Another date, hovering just beside it. December 11th, tomorrow. "The inspection," I breathed. "There's going to be an inspection tomorrow, but they'll miss the wiring because..." I closed my eyes, let the knowledge flow. "Because they'll be distracted by a water leak in the basement. A leak that hasn't happened yet." Ava clapped her hands. "Oh, you're good. Natural intuition. Just like your grandmother." "But how do we cause a leak that gets them to find the wiring?" I asked. Marcus grinned. "Leave that to me. I know a guy who owns a plumbing company, owes me a favor. Seems his son was going to die in a construction accident 5 years ago. Funny how an anonymous tip about faulty scaffolding can change things. The sun was coming up now, painting the Seattle skyline in shades of gold and pink. The city was waking up. People starting their days, oblivious to the currents of fate swirling around them. "The meeting Thursday," Ava said, standing with surprising grace. "Come, both of you. There's someone special I want you to meet. Someone who sees something none of us have encountered before." "What does he see?" I asked. "She," Ava corrected. "And she doesn't see anything. She changes things, just by touching someone. She can shift their date, add days, sometimes years, but..." She paused. "Every day she gives someone else comes off her own life. She's 17 years old. Sarah. And she's already given away 60 years. Thursday night came too fast. The leak had worked perfectly. City inspectors. annoyed by the vandalism that had flooded the Paramount's basement, had done a thorough examination of the building. They found the faulty wiring, along with 16 other code violations. The theater was shut down for emergency repairs. December 12th would come and go with no fire, no deaths. Marcus had been so relieved he'd actually cried, but I couldn't shake what Ava had said about the girl who could trade her life for others. The address on the card led to an old bookstore in Pioneer Square. Endings and beginnings, rare books. The irony wasn't lost on me. A bell chimed as I entered, and I was hit by the smell of old paper and leather. "Downstairs," a voice called. I recognized it as Ava's. The basement was larger than I'd expected. 15 people sat in a circle, some on chairs, some on cushions, ages ranging from teenagers to elderly. All of them had that same look Marcus had, like they were seeing something beyond the ordinary world. "Welcome," Ava said. "Everyone, this is Sarah. She sees inception points." Murmurs of interest rippled through the group. I noticed Marcus across the circle. He nodded encouragingly. "Before we begin," Ava continued, "I want to introduce our newest member, Lily." A young woman stood up. 17, just like Ava had said, but she looked older, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Her hands were covered in gloves, and she kept them clasped tightly in front of her. "Hi," Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper. I can change things. Death dates when I touch someone. I can see how long they have, and I can give them some of mine." "Show them," Ava said gently. Lily pulled off one glove. Her hand was covered in what looked like intricate tattoos, but as I looked closer, I realized they were scars. Thin white lines forming numbers. Dates. "Every person I've helped," she said. "Their original date and their new one. I keep track because..." Her voice broke. "Because I need to remember why it's worth it." An older man in the circle leaned forward. "How much have you given?" 63 years, 4 months, 18 days. Lily said without hesitation. "I was supposed to live to 91. Now." She shrugged. 28, maybe 29 if I'm careful." The room was silent. Then someone asked the question I was thinking. Why? Why give up so much? Lily smiled, and for a moment she looked her age. Because I gave my little brother 30 years, and he used them to become a doctor. He saved 47 people so far. Because I gave a teacher 10 years, and she inspired hundreds of students. Because I gave a homeless veteran 5 years, and he used them to reconcile with his daughter. Every year, I give away multiplies, creates ripples, changes the world in ways I could never do with my own time. But at what cost? Marcus asked. I could hear the pain in his voice. He knew what it was like to see death coming and be unable to stop it. The right cost, Lily said firmly. Then she looked at me. You see beginnings, right? Important moments? I nodded. What do you see when you look at me? I focused, let the feeling wash over me, and then I saw it, clear as day. Tomorrow, I said. December 13th, 3:17 p.m., Pike Place Market, near the... I frowned. Near the fish market, something important happens. Lily's eyes widened. The fish market? But I wasn't planning to... I never go there. Too many people. Too many possibilities for accidental contact. Maybe that's the point, Ava said thoughtfully. Sarah, can you see anything more specific? I closed my eyes, concentrated. The vision sharpened. A child, 8 years old, red jacket. He's going to... My eyes flew open. He's going to fall, hit his head. But if someone catches him... If I catch him, Lily said slowly, I'll have to touch him, and I'll see his date, and if it's soon... You'll give him years, Marcus finished. Even though you barely have any left to give. Lily pulled her gloves back on. Then I better be at the fish market tomorrow. No, I said, surprising myself. There's another way. I can see it, if you're not there. Someone else catches him, someone who needs to be a hero, who's been thinking about ending things. Saving that boy gives him purpose again, but only if you're not there. The room erupted in discussion. Some argued Lily should go anyway. Others said we had no right to play God. Ava called for quiet. "This is the burden we carry," she said, seeing the threads of fate but never knowing which ones to pull. "Lily, the choice is yours." Lily looked at me. "This person who saves him, do they live?" I nodded. 42 more years, good years, meaningful years. And the boy? Becomes a teacher, special education, helps hundreds of kids who everyone else gives up on. Lily pulled off her gloves again, stared at her scarred hands. I've been so focused on giving away years. I never thought about what happens when I'm not there, how my absence might be just as important as my presence. She looked around the circle. "I won't go to the market tomorrow, but..." She stood up, walked over to an elderly woman in the corner who'd been quiet the whole meeting. "June 15th, right?" The woman nodded, tears in her eyes. Lily took her hands. I watched something pass between them, a shimmer, like heat waves on hot asphalt. The woman gasped. 6 months, Lily said. "Enough to see your granddaughter graduate, it's not much. But it's everything," the woman whispered. Lily turned back to the group. "I choose who I help, when I help. That's how I honor the time I have left, even if it's not long." The meeting continued for another hour. People shared what they'd seen, warned about upcoming dangers, discussed ways to help without revealing themselves. But I kept thinking about Lily, about the courage it took to give up your future for strangers, about the wisdom to know when not to act. As the meeting ended, Marcus approached me. "You did good tonight. Seeing that other path, that's a rare gift. Sarah, even among us freaks." I laughed. "Is that what we are? Freaks?" "Guardians," Ava said, joining us. "That's what I prefer, guardian of moments, of possibilities, of the spaces between what is and what could be." We walked up the stairs together, back into the bookstore. The owner, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, was waiting. "How did it go?" he asked Ava. "We may have prevented a tragedy and saved 2 lives tonight," she said. "I'd call that a win, Robert." Robert smiled, then looked at me. "You're Ruth Mackenzie's granddaughter." I nodded. She used to come here before she got sick. Said one day her granddaughter would walk through that door, and I'd know her by her eyes. He studied me. "She was right. You have her eyes. Her gift, but stronger." He handed me a wrapped package. "She left this for you. Said to give it to you after your first meeting." I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a leather journal, just like Ava's. The first page had a note in my grandmother's handwriting. "My dear Sarah, if you're reading this, then the gift has awakened. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to guide you, but I've seen the woman you become. Strong, wise, compassionate. The journal is for recording what you see, the inception points, the moments of change. But remember, seeing is only half the gift. The other half is knowing when to act and when to let fate unfold. Trust your instincts, trust Marcus and Ava, and trust that every moment, every choice, every beginning you see as a chance to make the world a little brighter. All my love. Grandma Ruth, P.S., that barista Jake? Your first date is February 14th, but the important one is June 3rd. You'll know why when it comes." I clutched the journal to my chest, feeling my grandmother's presence so strongly it took my breath away. "Come on," Marcus said gently. "I'll walk you home. The streets aren't safe this late, and I'd hate for anything to happen to you before February 14th. We said our goodbyes and stepped out into the Seattle night. The city was quiet, peaceful, somewhere out there. The Paramount Theater stood dark and safe. A homeless veteran was planning his trip to see his daughter. A teacher was dreaming of the students she'd inspire with her extra 6 months. And tomorrow, A boy in a red jacket would be saved by someone who needed to be a hero. "Do you ever wonder," I asked Marcus as we walked, "if we're actually changing fate or just fulfilling it? Like, maybe this is all supposed to happen exactly this way?" He thought for a moment. "Does it matter? We see what we see. We help who we can. We save lives, ease suffering, bring people together, whether that's changing fate or fulfilling it." He shrugged. "The result is the same. The world is a little better because we're in it." We reached my apartment building. Marcus turned to go, then paused. "Sarah? My date, December 12th. It's changed." My heart skipped. "Changed? To when?" He smiled. That genuine smile I'd only seen once before. "I can't see it anymore. It's just gone, like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I think saving those people at the Paramount, it changed my path somehow, gave me purpose again. A reason to keep going despite the burden. What will you do now?" "Same thing I've been doing. Sit on my corner, draw my dates, help who I can. But now..." He looked up at the stars, barely visible through the city lights. "Now, I'll do it knowing that the future isn't set in stone. That every date I write is a possibility, not a certainty. That maybe, just maybe, showing people their endings can help them find better beginnings." He walked away, whistling something that sounded like an old jazz tune. I watched until he disappeared around the corner, then headed inside, in my apartment. I opened my grandmother's journal to the second page and began to write. December 11th, first meeting. Met others like me tonight. Learned that the gift comes in many forms. Saw how heavy the burden can be, but also how much light it can bring. Helped save 347 lives. Witnessed true sacrifice. Understood that sometimes the most important choice is choosing not to act. Tomorrow, a boy in a red jacket will change 2 lives just by falling, and I'll be at the market, just in case, because even guardians need witnesses. Sarah Mackenzie, P.S., scheduled a coffee date with Jake for February 14th. Grandma was right. Some beginnings are worth waiting for. I closed the journal, made some tea, and settled onto my couch. Outside, Seattle slept peacefully, unaware of the guardians watching over them, the street performers who saw death, the blind women who glimpsed possibilities, the teenage girls who traded their years for strangers, the granddaughters who saw the moments when everything could change. We were out there, scattered across the city, across the world, seeing the threads of fate and doing our best to weave them into something beautiful, something meaningful, something worth the burden we carried. And somewhere in Portland, a pharmaceutical company was searching for a woman who could see illness. They thought they could use her, control her, profit from her gift. They had no idea what they were up against. But that's a story for another night. For now, if you're still listening, if you've made it this far, do me a favor. Tomorrow, when you pass that street performer, that fortune teller, that strange old woman feeding pigeons in the park, stop, drop $1 in their hat. Listen to what they have to say, because you never know. They might just save your life, or better yet, they might help you save someone else's. Sweet dreams, and remember, every ending is just a new beginning waiting to be discovered. Don't forget to check the date on your calendar tomorrow. You never know when it might be more important than you think.